She was forced into marriage with a ruthless millionaire. But what he did after shocked her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The rain falls heavy across a small college town in Texas, turning sidewalks into rivers of silver. The street lamps cast long reflections on the pavement, and the smell of wet asphalt mixes with the faint aroma of coffee drifting from a nearby diner. Under one flickering lamp walks a young man named Mark Davis, 23 years old, carrying a battered backpack that feels heavier than his shoulders can bear. His shoes are soaked, his coat too thin to keep out the chill. Every step echoes with the weight of unpaid tuition, hospital bills for his sick mother, and the debts left behind by his late father. Mark's phone vibrates in his pocket. He stops beneath the awning of a closed bookstore and answers with a voice that carries more fatigue than youth. This is Mark Davis speaking. On the other end is a voice unlike any he has ever heard. Smooth, calm, and commanding, like the steel edge of a blade. Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I would like to meet with you. It is regarding your financial situation. Mark frowns, pressing the phone closer. I am sorry, who are you? How do you know? I know enough, she interrupts sharply. Meet me at Brooks Bistro, 7 o'clock this evening. Do not be late. The line goes dead. Mark stares at the screen, raindrops streaming down the glass. He has no idea who this woman is or how she knows his name. But the weight of her words lingers. Brooks Bistro is the most expensive cafe in town, a place for judges, bankers, and heirs, not for a student drowning in debt. And yet something compels him forward. By the time he arrives, the rain has soaked him through. The golden glow from inside spills across the street like a promise he does not believe he deserves. He pushes open the heavy wooden door and steps into warmth. The air is filled with the scent of roasted coffee beans and the low murmur of polished voices. His eyes scan the room until they land on her. Eleanor Brooks. She sits at a corner table, silver hair pinned in a flawless chignon, pearls glinting at her neck. Her tailored suit is sharp enough to cut glass. Her posture regal. Her gaze direct. When she gestures for him to sit, it feels less like an invitation and more like a command. Mr. Davis, she says, her tone even. Thank you for coming. Oh? Mark slides into the seat, unsure of why he obeys. What is this about? She studies him over the rim of her teacup. I know about your debts, the hospital expenses, the student loans, the creditors at your door. I know you are barely holding everything together. Mark's jaw tightens. How do you know all this? She sets down her cup with deliberate care. Her blue eyes lock onto his. Because I make it my business to know, and because I can offer you a way out. Mark leans forward, his voice low, cautious. What kind of way out? She pauses, letting the silence press in from all sides of the elegant cafe. Then, as if announcing a business deal, she says the words that will alter the course of his life forever. Marry me. The world seems to freeze. Mark stares at her, certain he has misheard. The sound of rain against the windows, the clink of silverware, the hushed conversations all fade into nothing. Excuse me? He whispers. You heard me, Mr. Davis, she replies. This is not about romance. It is a contract. In exchange for becoming my husband, I will pay every debt you owe, secure your family's future, and ensure your career is unshakable. All I require is your signature and your silence. The offer hangs between them like thunder waiting to strike. Mark grips the edge of the table, his pulse racing. Part of him wants to laugh, to walk out, to call her insane. But another part, the part that thinks of his mother's frail health, his sister's unpaid tuition, and the eviction notice waiting at their door, knows he cannot afford to laugh. Across the table, Eleanor Brooks sits perfectly still, a queen awaiting her pawn's first move. And Mark Davis realizes this night is no accident. It is the opening move in a game where the price of survival is his freedom, and the cost of refusal could be everything he has left. Mark leaves the bistro that night with his mind in turmoil. The rain has not stopped. and every drop feels like a hammer striking his skull. He walks fast through the empty streets, replaying her words again and again. Marry me. That impossible command echoes louder than the thunder rolling across the Texas sky. By the time he reaches the small duplex he shares with his family, the clock has passed midnight. The kitchen light is still on. His mother sits at the worn table, her frail hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. She looks up as he enters, her face pale from months of illness. "Mark," she says softly, "you are soaked. Where were you?" He drops his backpack on the floor and sinks into the chair opposite her. The weight of Eleanor Brooks's offer presses against his chest. For a moment he cannot speak. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he tells her everything. About the mysterious phone call, the luxurious cafe, the woman with steel in her eyes, and the proposal that sounded less like romance and more like a transaction. His mother's fingers tighten around the mug. "She asked you to marry her, but why?" Mark shakes his head. "Companionship, control, whatever reason she has. She said she would clear every debt, pay for your treatments, cover Lisa's tuition, all of it. But in return," he cannot finish the sentence. The word marriage feels heavy on his tongue. The kitchen falls silent except for the rain tapping against the thin window. His mother's gaze softens. "I know it sounds unthinkable, Mark, but maybe this is a chance. Maybe she is serious. You have carried so much since your father passed. I see the way you grind yourself down working nights and still falling behind. If she can give you stability—" He looks at her, his chest tight. "You are asking me to marry a woman I do not love. A stranger who sees me as a bargain, not a partner." She reaches across the table, her hand trembling as it covers his. "I am asking you to save yourself, to save us. You are 23 years old, and you are drowning. Sometimes survival means taking a hand that is offered, even if it does not look like the hand you wanted." Mark stares at the peeling wallpaper, hearing the hum of the old refrigerator. In the next room, his younger sister Lisa coughs in her sleep. The sound pierces him deeper than any blade. He knows she has been struggling with her classes, terrified of losing her scholarship if tuition is not paid. He knows his mother's prescriptions are stacked high on the counter, bottles that cost more than he earns in a week of part-time work. The next morning, he drags himself to his job at the campus law library. His uniform shirt is wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. As he shelves casebooks, his thoughts refuse to quiet. Every aisle seems to whisper Eleanor Brooks's offer. Every tired breath reminds him that he is running out of options. At lunch, his phone buzzes again. A message appears, crisp and cold. "Decision. 1 day only. 7 p.m. at Brooks Bistro. Do not be late." Mark closes his eyes, his pulse hammering. There is no escape. His pride tells him to walk away, but reality grips him tighter. Without help, he will lose his mother's treatment, his sister's education, and the last fragments of their home. By evening, he finds himself once again standing before the glowing entrance of Brooks Bistro. The rain has stopped, but the air is still heavy, carrying the smell of wet pavement. He breathes deeply, straightens his shoulders, and steps inside. Eleanor Brooks is already there, seated at the same table, her presence commanding as ever. "You have decided," she says, without looking up from her tablet. Mark takes a seat, his hands clenched on his knees. He draws in a breath that feels like a verdict. "I will do it." She sets the tablet aside and studies him with a faint smile, her expression unreadable. "Good. The arrangements will be made immediately. Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis." The words chill him to the bone. He knows he has just signed away more than a contract. He has signed away his freedom. And yet, for the sake of his family, he convinces himself he has chosen survival. Outside, the night settles over the town, quiet and watchful. Mark walks home under the street lamps, wondering if he has just saved his family or if he has sold his soul. The week passes in a blur. Mark Davis feels as if he is moving through someone else's life, not his own. The decision has been made, and now the preparations unfold with military precision. Eleanor Brooks does not waste time. She summons her lawyers, arranges the paperwork, and sets a date at the courthouse. Everything about her manner is efficient, stripped of sentiment. On the morning of the ceremony, Mark dresses in the dark suit she has provided. The fabric is expensive, the cut flawless, but when he looks at his reflection in the mirror, he barely recognizes the man staring back. His mother kisses his cheek, her eyes shining with both pride and worry. His sister Lisa hugs him tightly, whispering that she believes in him. Their faith steadies him, even as doubt claws at his stomach. At the courthouse, the atmosphere is clinical. A judge sits behind a desk, flipping through documents with little interest. Two witnesses are present, Eleanor's attorney and a notary. There are no flowers, no music, no friends gathered to celebrate. Only the signing of papers, the exchange of vows spoken without warmth, and the official declaration that binds him to her. When the judge pronounces them husband and wife, Mark's chest feels hollow. Eleanor turns to him with a polished smile that does not quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis," she says once more, repeating the words from the cafe. They step outside into a drizzle of rain. A sleek black car waits at the curb, the driver already holding the door open. Mark follows her into the back seat, the leather cold beneath his hands. The silence inside is thick. He wants to ask why she chose him, why she insists on this arrangement. But her expression is unreadable, her gaze fixed on the gray blur of the city through the tinted glass. The drive takes them away from the crowded streets, into the hills at the edge of town. There, behind iron gates, rises Eleanor's estate. The mansion looks like something carved out of history, with towering columns, pristine stone walls, and windows that reflect the stormy sky. It is beautiful, but there is no warmth in it. As the gates close behind them, Mark feels as if he is stepping into a gilded prison. Inside, the house is even more imposing. Marble floors stretch out under crystal chandeliers, and the air smells faintly of polished wood and old money. A housekeeper leads Mark to a grand bedroom, prepared for him. The bed is vast, the furnishings antique, but everything feels untouched, like a museum display. He places his small suitcase on the edge of the bed, aware of how out of place he is. That evening, Eleanor and Mark sit across from one another at a long dining table. The meal is exquisite, prepared by a chef he has not seen, served by staff who move silently through the room. Mark barely tastes the food. He feels the weight of the mansion pressing down on him, the distance between them stretched wider by the polished wood of the table. "I trust you are settling in," Eleanor says calmly as she cuts into her fillet. "It is. Different," Mark replies carefully. "This place is huge. It feels like I might get lost." Her lips curve in the faintest of smiles. "You will learn." Mark sets down his fork, choosing his words with caution. "Why me? You could have chosen anyone. A man of status, someone who moves in your world. Why a student drowning in debt?" Eleanor pauses, her knife resting against the porcelain plate. For a moment, her gaze flickers, revealing something softer, but then it hardens again. "Because you are young, unattached, and desperate enough to accept. I do not need love, Mr. Davis. I need a companion who will share my name and secure my legacy. Nothing more." The coldness of her tone chills him, but he cannot ignore the flicker he saw in her eyes. Perhaps there is more beneath her steel facade. Perhaps there is a wound she is hiding. That night, Mark lies awake in the vast bed, staring at the ornate ceiling. The rain drums softly against the windows, and the house groans with the silence of wealth. He thinks of his mother's tired smile, his sister's hopeful embrace, and the price he has paid for their survival. He remembers the way Eleanor looked at him, not with affection but with calculation. Still, something unsettles him. Because behind that calculation, he sensed loneliness, a shadow that mirrors his own. Mark closes his eyes, uncertain of what lies ahead. He has signed the contract, spoken the vows, stepped into her world. And now, whether he is ready or not, the real test of this strange marriage is about to begin. The following days unfold like chapters of a book Mark Davis never intended to read. Eleanor Brooks wastes no time in transforming him from a struggling law student into the polished husband she needs. Early one morning, he is escorted into a private dressing room where a stylist waits with racks of tailored suits. "Mr. Davis." The stylist greets him, already pulling out a charcoal jacket. "We have to get you fitted. Mrs. Brooks has a gala next week." Mark stands stiffly as the man measures his shoulders, adjusts collars, and critiques his posture. Hours later, he is handed a suit so finely cut it feels like armor. But the reflection staring back at him in the mirror is still foreign, a poor student dressed in borrowed power. Eleanor enters the room, her heels sharp against the marble floor. She looks him over, with an expression halfway between approval and command. "Better," she says. "But remember, appearance is only the beginning. At these events, every eye will be on you. You must not stumble. The lessons continue." A private etiquette coach arrives each afternoon to drill him on dining manners, conversation cues, and the subtle language of the wealthy. Mark fumbles more than once, earning a cool correction from Eleanor's lips. She never raises her voice, but the steel in her gaze reminds him this marriage is no place for weakness. Despite his missteps, he persists. Late at night, he practices alone in the grand dining room, memorizing how to hold a glass, how to stand without slouching, how to carry himself with confidence he does not feel. His hands are rough from years of part-time jobs, yet he forces them to move with grace. One evening, as he rehearses introducing himself to imaginary investors, Eleanor lingers in the doorway. For a moment, he does not notice her. When she finally speaks, her tone is softer than before. "You are improving," she admits. Mark straightens, a faint flush rising in his cheeks. "I am trying. I know I am not who you expected." Her eyes flicker, unreadable. Perhaps not, but determination is worth more than polish. Then, as quickly as the softness appears, it vanishes. "Do not forget, the gala is not a rehearsal. You will represent my name, fail, and you will regret it." The night of the event arrives sooner than Mark expects. The mansion's staff bustle around preparing, while a sleek car waits at the steps to drive them into the city. Dressed in his tailored suit, Mark feels both armored and exposed. Eleanor, radiant in a gown of deep sapphire, takes his arm with practiced grace. As they enter the glittering ballroom, chandeliers blaze overhead, and the murmur of wealth fills the air. Conversations hush for a moment, curious eyes turning toward the mysterious young husband at Eleanor Brooks's side. Mark feels the weight of their scrutiny, but he forces a steady breath. This is his first true test, the beginning of his life as more than a contract, more than a pawn. And as he walks beside Eleanor under the light of 100 crystal chandeliers, he cannot help but wonder if he is walking deeper into a trap, or into the beginning of something far more dangerous than debt, an unexpected bond neither of them can deny. The ballroom shimmers with gold light, and every corner hums with conversation. Mark Davis stands at Eleanor Brooks's side, his heart pounding under the weight of polished eyes that measure his worth in silence. The gala is filled with business leaders, investors, and socialites who all seem to glide effortlessly across marble floors. To them, Eleanor is a queen returning to her court. To Mark, it feels like a trial he is not ready to face. Servers move quietly, carrying trays of champagne. A string quartet plays softly near the stage. Eleanor greets guests with the ease of someone born into power, her smile sharp but controlled. Mark follows her lead, repeating the lines he practiced, shaking hands with strangers who seem to know far too much about him already. At one point, a wealthy guest leans too close to a young waitress, speaking to her in a tone that drips with entitlement. Mark notices the discomfort on her face, the way her eyes dart toward the kitchen doors as if searching for escape. Without thinking, he steps forward. "Excuse me," Mark says firmly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I believe the lady has work to do. Perhaps you should allow her to continue." The guest blinks in surprise, then scoffs and steps back. The waitress gives Mark a quick, grateful glance before slipping away. Eleanor watches from across the room, her expression unreadable. Later, as they sit at a table prepared for the foundation's board members, she finally speaks. "You handled that well," she says quietly, her fork gliding across the porcelain plate. Mark exhales slowly. "I did not plan it. I just thought it was the right thing to do." Her gaze lingers on him for a moment longer than usual. That is not something many in this room would have done. The evening continues. Eleanor delivers a short speech at the podium, commanding attention with every word. Mark watches her, struck by the force of her presence. For the first time, he sees beyond the icy facade. He sees the loneliness beneath, the fierce determination of a woman who has carried her empire alone for far too long. When the applause fades and the gala winds down, they return to the mansion. The car ride is silent, but not cold. Something unspoken lingers between them. That night, Mark steps onto the balcony of his room, staring out over the manicured gardens bathed in moonlight. He remembers the gratitude in the waitress's eyes, the rare softness in Eleanor's tone, and the way his heart no longer feels quite as hollow. Inside, Eleanor stands by her window in another wing of the mansion. For the first time, she allows herself to wonder if this arrangement might lead to something she never intended, something real. The night is still, but both of them feel the same unspoken truth. The contract may have started this marriage, but it is no longer the only force binding them together. The weeks after the gala move with an unexpected rhythm. For the first time since stepping into Eleanor Brooks's world, Mark Davis begins to see cracks in her armor. The mansion, once a cage of marble and silence, now offers fleeting moments that feel almost human. One evening, Mark finds Eleanor in the library, not with her usual cold detachment, but sitting in a leather chair with a book resting closed in her lap. Her gaze drifts to the fire, distant and heavy. "You are awake late," he says quietly from the doorway. She does not startle, only turns her head slightly. "Sleep is not a luxury I have mastered." He steps inside, unsure if he should sit. "Because of work?" Her lips curl into something that is not quite a smile. "Because of memories." When you have lived long enough with betrayal, rest becomes a stranger. Mark studies her, the firelight tracing the lines of strength and loneliness in her face. For once, she does not hide behind commands or cool remarks. For once, she looks like a woman who has been fighting battles no one else can see. Later that night, they find themselves standing on the balcony, the city lights glittering in the distance. The air is cool, the silence broken only by the soft rustle of leaves. Eleanor leans against the railing, her sapphire gown catching the moonlight. "Do you know why I asked you?" she asks suddenly, her voice low. Mark swallows. "Because I was desperate enough to agree." Her eyes meet his, sharp but weary. "Because you were different. Everyone in my world wants something: control, money, power. You wanted survival." That kind of honesty is rare. For a moment, neither speaks. The distance between them narrows, not through words but through the quiet admission that both of them are trapped in cages of circumstance. The next days show small shifts. Eleanor begins to allow Mark into her routine's board meetings where she tests his composure. Dinners where her voice softens when speaking to him. Evenings where silence feels less like punishment and more like peace. Mark notices her subtle gestures, the way she lingers when he enters a room, the way her hand hesitates over her glass when their eyes meet, the way her shoulders relax ever so slightly when he speaks with conviction. But the shadows of her past remain. One night, during a storm, she reveals fragments of her history. A family that turned on her for inheritance. A man she once loved who betrayed her trust for wealth. Her voice wavers only once, when she admits, "It is easier to command loyalty than to trust it." Mark listens, his chest tightening. He knows that pain. He knows what it is to feel abandoned, to fight alone. Without thinking, he places his hand gently over hers. "Not everyone will betray you," he says softly. "Some people are worth trusting." Her hand trembles beneath his, but she does not pull away. Instead, she holds his gaze for a long moment, as if weighing the truth of his words against the scars of her past. That night, when Mark returns to his room, he cannot sleep. Something has shifted between them. What began as survival is becoming something dangerous, something that could break him if he lets it. For the first time since signing the contract, Mark wonders if he is no longer just living her plan. He wonders if, against all odds, he and Eleanor are writing a different story, one where companionship may turn into something neither of them dared to imagine. The mansion, once silent, now carries a fragile heartbeat, and Mark, lying awake beneath the carved ceiling, knows his life is no longer just a debt repaid. It is a bond forming in the unlikeliest of places, fragile but undeniable. The fragile calm between Mark Davis and Eleanor Brooks does not last. The world outside their mansion walls begins to take notice. Whispers spread through the business community about the young husband who appeared out of nowhere. Journalists dig for details, eager to expose scandal. One evening, as Mark prepares for another formal dinner, he hears raised voices echoing through the marble halls. He follows the sound and finds Eleanor in the study, standing face to face with a man in an expensive suit. His expression is sharp, almost cruel. "You think no one will notice?" the man sneers. a penniless student suddenly married into your fortune. They will call it a fraud, Eleanor. They will call it desperation. And when the board sees how reckless you have become, they will strip you of control. Eleanor's posture is rigid, but her voice remains calm. This conversation is over. Leave my house. The man slams a folder onto her desk before storming past Mark. For a moment, the hallway is filled with tension so thick it nearly suffocates. Mark steps into the study, his heart pounding. Who was that? Eleanor exhales slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. A shareholder. One who believes exposing us will give him leverage. Mark frowns. Exposing us? You mean the marriage? Yes, she cuts in. He suspects the truth, that this began as a contract. If he proves it, everything I have built will crumble. And you, her eyes lock on his, hard and pained, you will be branded nothing more than a gold digger. The words slice through Mark, sharper than any insult. He opens his mouth to reply, but she turns away, her shoulders tense. This is the price of our arrangement. Do not think the world will forgive it. That night, Mark lies awake, torn apart by conflicting emotions. He thinks of his mother's fragile health, his sister's future, and the vow he made to protect them. But he also thinks of Eleanor, of the quiet moments when her guard slipped, when she revealed loneliness beneath her strength. Now, scandal looms over them like a storm. And for the first time, Mark realizes this marriage is no longer only about survival. It is about trust, about reputation, about two lives bound together by a secret that others are determined to destroy. The storm breaks sooner than Mark Davis expects. Days after the confrontation in Eleanor Brooks's study, the morning papers run bold headlines. Contract marriage? Questions rise around Eleanor Brooks's young husband. Photographs from the gala show, Mark at her side, his unease captured in every frame. By noon, reporters crowd the gates of the mansion. Cameras flash whenever the black car leaves the driveway. Mark feels their judgment like arrows piercing his skin. He hears the whispered words, opportunist, gold digger, student chasing fortune. Each one burns deeper than the last. Inside the mansion, the tension builds. At a board meeting, several shareholders demand Eleanor explain herself. One even waves a copy of the newspaper. This marriage threatens our reputation, he declares. Step down or risk everything you have built. Mark sits at the long table beside Eleanor, his pulse racing. He watches her face remain calm, her voice steady. I will not be blackmailed by speculation, she says. And I will not apologize for the choices I make in my personal life. But when the meeting ends, Mark sees the strain in her eyes. Alone in the corridor, he finally speaks. They are using me against you. If I leave, maybe the pressure will stop. Her gaze snaps to his, sharp with something more than anger. Do you think walking away will protect me? It will only prove them right, and it will destroy you. Mark clenches his fists, the weight of helplessness pressing down. Then tell me what I can do. Tell me how to fight beside you. For a long moment, Eleanor says nothing. Then, with rare vulnerability, she whispers, stand with me. Not because of the contract, not because of the debts, but because you choose to. That night, Mark makes his decision. At a press conference hastily arranged outside the mansion, he steps forward before the cameras. His voice shakes at first, but grows stronger with every word. I did not marry Eleanor Brooks for her wealth. I married her because she believed in me when no one else did. If that makes me a target, so be it. I will not abandon her. The crowd erupts with questions, but Mark no longer hears them. For the first time since this began, he has chosen not out of desperation, but out of loyalty. And as Eleanor watches from the doorway, her expression unreadable, Mark wonders if he has crossed the invisible line where a contract ends and something real begins. The fallout from Mark Davis's press conference changes everything. Reporters still linger at the gates, but the tone of their questions shifts. Instead of mocking, some begin to wonder if there is more to this marriage than scandal. The public, hungry for drama, finds itself caught between cynicism and sympathy. Inside the mansion, Eleanor Brooks studies Mark with a look he has never seen before. It is not her usual calculation, not the cold mask of control. It is something raw, almost fragile. That night, as they share a quiet dinner without staff or ceremony, she finally speaks. "You had no obligation to defend me," she says softly, her fork resting untouched on her plate. Mark meets her eyes. "Yes, I did. Maybe not because of the contract, but because I wanted to. I will not let anyone tear down the woman who gave me the chance to save my family." For a long moment, silence stretches between them, filled only by the steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then Eleanor's hand drifts across the table and rests on his. It is the first time she reaches for him, not as a demand, but as a choice. Weeks later, the whispers begin to fade. The board stabilizes, the investors calm, and the headlines move on to fresher scandals. Yet within the walls of the estate, something permanent has changed. Eleanor organizes an intimate event at a local art gallery, one that funds scholarships for students, like Mark once was. She insists on naming the exhibition, "The New Beginning," but the curator quietly adds another plaque beneath it. "In honor of Eleanor and Mark Brooks, a partnership built on resilience." When the night arrives, Mark stands before the crowd, far less nervous than at the gala. He speaks not about contracts or debts, but about second chances. About how trust, once broken, can still be rebuilt. About how even in the unlikeliest circumstances, love can grow stronger than fear. The applause is gentle but heartfelt. Eleanor joins him on stage, her hand slipping into his as cameras flash. She takes the microphone and, for the first time in public, allows the world to see the truth. "I once believed loyalty could only be bought. Tonight, I know loyalty can be given freely, and I know it can turn into love." The crowd rises to its feet, but Mark barely hears them. His eyes remain on Eleanor, who turns to him with a smile that finally reaches her eyes. Then, before the entire room, she speaks words that banish the last shadows of doubt. "Mark Davis, will you marry me again? This time, not as a contract. This time, as my partner, my equal, and my love." The room erupts with gasps and applause. Mark feels his throat tighten, his heart overflowing. He answers without hesitation. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." The gallery fills with cheers, the sound of cameras clicking, and the shimmer of tears in the eyes of strangers who have witnessed more than a marriage. They have witnessed redemption. That night, as Mark and Eleanor walk hand in hand beneath the glow of the city lights, the weight of contracts and debts is gone. What remains is something real, something earned. For the first time, both of them know they are not bound by necessity, but by choice. And in that choice, they find the one thing neither of them thought possible: love that is true, unbreakable, and entirely their own.